reaching for a pen, opening a door, or throwing a ball. Today, favoring your left hand is treated as a minor biological quirk, something that affects roughly 10% of the global population. But for centuries, this simple, involuntary reflex carried a severe moral penalty. In certain eras, it could even sign your death warrant. To understand how a genetic trait became a crime, we have to look at the baseline of human bias. Because 90% of the world is naturally right-handed, ancient societies looked at the minority and felt an instinctual unease. When a physical behavior is uncommon, the human brain quickly categorizes it as unnatural. That unease eventually cemented itself into the very words we speak. Take the word sinister. Today, it implies something dark, threatening, or evil, but its origin is entirely literal. In ancient Latin, the word sinistra simply meant the left hand. Over generations, the meaning evolved, attaching malevolence to a physical direction. Meanwhile, the Latin word for the right hand, dexter, followed the exact opposite path. It blossomed into the modern word dexterity. The right side became permanently associated with skill, capability, and correctness. As these definitions were handed down through generations, the association between direction and character began to feel like common sense. The words moved beyond simple descriptions of movement, eventually making claims about a person's character based solely on the hand they favored. This created an environment where a neutral physical trait was already loaded with suspicion. Language had built a foundation that allowed later religious and legal systems to treat a biological function as an ideological threat. Early, pre-modern cultures took these linguistic anxieties and mapped them directly onto their spiritual beliefs. The right hand was associated with the sun, the east, warmth, and divine purity. The left was cast in shadow. This bias was eventually codified into literal theology. In the book of Matthew, chapter 25, verse 33, the final judgment is described with strict directional geometry. God places the righteous sheep on his right side and the damned goats on his left. During the Middle Ages, metaphors were often taken literally. If the damned were on the left, then the left was the domain of the damned. Medieval art began depicting the devil explicitly favoring his left hand, even showing him performing unholy baptisms with it. During the Spanish Inquisition, these theological suspicions were codified into state-sanctioned violence. Inquisitors began treating left-handedness as forensic evidence, viewing it as physical proof of a pact with the devil and a primary indicator of witchcraft. This fear became so embedded that it dictated the physical architecture of the era. If you examine the spiral staircases in medieval castles, you'll find they are almost always built to curve clockwise going up. This specific mathematical design allowed a right-handed defender to swing a sword freely while severely restricting the arm of any left-handed attacker. The right-handed majority had engineered a physical and spiritual world where simply existing as a left-hander was inherently dangerous. As the world moved into the 19th and 20th centuries, religious fervor began to wane. Society did not drop its bias, it simply rebranded it. The so-called curse of the left hand was reclassified as a medical defect that required a cure.
The early school system enforced physical conformity with brutal efficiency. Teachers routinely tied children's left arms behind their backs, forcing them to write with their right hand to ensure compliance. This forced switching inflicted severe neurological trauma. By making a left-hand dominant child use their right hand, educators inadvertently caused crosswiring in the developing brain. This unnatural stress frequently resulted in secondary issues, including severe stuttering and dyslexia. One of the most high-profile victims of this practice was King George VI. His famous, debilitating stammer originated directly from royal tutors forcing him to write with his right hand as a child. The physical tools of the era only reinforced the stigma. Writing from left to right with a dip pen and wet ink meant a left-hander's palm would drag across the fresh words. Teachers weaponized this smudge problem, pointing to the messy paper as objective proof that left-handers were inherently clumsy and careless. Even casual social contracts demanded compliance.
The standard right-handed handshake originated as a way to prove you weren't concealing a weapon. It forced left-handers to suppress their dominant instinctual side simply to say hello. The modern world replaced the threat of the stake with invisible design barriers. Under the guise of education and manners, society broke the spirit of a minority by constantly reminding them they were physically flawed. Looking at this model of human DNA, we can see exactly where empirical science finally intervened. Researchers identified a specific genetic marker, the LLRRTM1 gene, proving once and for all that left-handedness is a hardwired code. It is not a choice nor a defect and has nothing to do with morality. This genetic discovery introduced an evolutionary mystery. If left-handers were persecuted for millennia, why did this 10% survive? Biologists point to the southpaw edge. In a society dominated by right-handers, a left-handed fighter holds a distinct survival advantage in hand-to-hand combat. They are entirely accustomed to fighting right-handers, while right-handers are completely unprepared for a strike from the opposite side. Beyond physical combat, there is a profound neurological trade-off. Left-handers frequently exhibit higher activity in the right hemisphere of the brain. This is the region governing spatial awareness, out-of-the-box problem-solving, and exceptional creativity. Leonardo da Vinci capitalized on this creative advantage, visualizing complex anatomy from angles right-handers couldn't see. His famous mirror writing served a practical purpose. Writing from right to left prevented his hand from smudging the wet ink. Today, the explicit stigma is mostly dead. Yet, the ghosts of the past still linger in our language when we call an awkward comment gauche, the French word for left, and left-handers must still navigate a physical world largely engineered for the comfort of the right-handed majority. The history of the left hand serves as a demonstration of how a neutral physical trait can be warped into a moral crisis. If for thousands of years we could demonize the simple act of holding a pen, it suggests that many of our current labels for unnatural behavior may be rooted in the same ancient fear of the unfamiliar.